A strength a day, be your best every day. Hi, I'm Demas, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. I aim to help you stay healthy, be happier, and deal with challenges with greater resilience. Do you know what helps kids and teens to build a high level of optimism, resilience, and achievement? As parents and educators, how can you help your kids and teens to flourish? Today, you will meet Professor Lea Waters. Lea will show you how you can identify, grow, and celebrate the strengths of your children so that they can flourish. Thank you. Hi, I'm Demas, founder and director of Strength Optimizer. Thank you for watching Strength Optimizer, the Size Up Your Wellbeing series. Today, we have Professor Lea Waters joining us. Lea is a psychologist, researcher, author, and speaker. She's one of the world's leading experts in positive organizations, positive educations, and strength-based parenting. And Lea has helped many organizations, educators, and parents around the world to help their employees and parents to help their children also to flourish in life. So I'm so grateful to have you joining us today, Lea. How are you doing?
Hi, Davis. I'm doing well.
That's good. That's good. Look, once again, thank you for taking the time to share with us strength-based parenting. And I still remember that in my son's previous school, in your book, The Strength Switch is one of the recommended books for the educators and parents. And as a parent myself of an 11-year-old son, I definitely have read your book, and I'm sure that a lot of parents and educators also have benefited from your books as well. So I guess that before we dive into the strength-based parenting, perhaps can you tell us briefly about your parenting journey and experience?
Yeah, sure. So I have an 18-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. I have been a practicing qualified psychologist for 27 years. So I knew when I first became pregnant, I knew that I would have a particular skill set being a qualified psychologist to help my children, to help them when things weren't going so well. And that's how I was trained initially in my psychology training, around working with kind of problems, challenges, pathology, but becoming pregnant, I realized, well, what happens when things are going well for my kids? What happens when they're going through a patch where life is good? Yeah. How do I help them in that situation? And my training as a psychologist didn't really, at that point, it hadn't trained me to be able to help my kids make the most of their good patches and amplify their strengths, their talents, their assets, their qualities. I had a lot of training on how to help them sort of minimize their shortcomings and work through problems and work through hard times in their life, which obviously that was a helpful skill set. So moving into the field of positive psychology when I did, which was sort of just before, around the time of my pregnancy, that really sort of opened me up to how it is that I can parent, how it is that I can tune into the natural born qualities and talents of each of my two children. And they both have their own unique separate set of qualities and talents and strengths, how it is that I can tap into those and, as a parent, really amplify what is right about my two children. And so that it's been so far an 18 long journey. It's a lifelong journey really as a parent, but an 18-year long journey of helping my son and my daughter to definitely work through the areas of improvement, definitely work through the things that they need to focus on, the things that they need to build up, getting, more organized, being more patient, having more perseverance, speaking to their parents politely in the teenage years. You're not quite there yet, Adidas, but in the teenage years for sure. So we're working on all of that. But at the same time, my parenting has very much been about sitting right beside that is what are the unique qualities in my children and what can I do as a parent to multiply those, to build those up, to get them connected with the right people, the right opportunities, the right experiences to really bring forward their strengths.
So good, so good. And I guess that it's always an added bonus benefits to be able to leverage and utilize your professional training as a psychologist into understanding the human behaviors, the mind, but also to integrate it into the personal parenting experiences. After all, we all heard this cliche saying that unfortunately there's no specific parenting degree we all can study, or even a PhD in parenting. It's still there's a big gap in terms of what is happening in the theoretical frameworks or even the research studies as versus to the day-to-day grinding sometimes of parenting your own children.
Yeah, it's so true what you say. And I guess my response to that is I'm lucky that my professional training and skill set is useful for parenting. But there's 2 points to make around that. One is sometimes you can have all the training in the world, but you're still just a human being, and you're trying to raise these two, in my case, 2 people. And we're in the middle of COVID, and here in Melbourne, we had many months, sort of 7 months of lockdown, hard lockdown last year. So 2 teenagers, 2 adults, 1 home. So even the best of my training can go out the window. But the other thing I want to say about that, I suppose, to the people who are listening, is the beauty of taking a strength-based approach is you don't have to be a qualified psychologist to do that. It really is just a mindset and a little bit of language and a little bit of understanding. And anyone can do it. Anyone can be a strength-based parent. It's really about how it's training our mind to place attention first on what's going well with our kids. And before we focus on their weaknesses, faults, flaws, the annoying things they do during the day. And so it really just is a matter of intentionally changing what we focus on. And, as parents, we can notice how much time they're on the screen, but we fail to notice the time where they're not on the screen, and we can notice the times where they're being rude or grumpy or non-communicative with us. We place our attention on that, but we don't, but we fail to notice that actually multiple times during the day, they've laughed, they've engaged, they've taken their dishes from the table up to the sink. We can notice how much junk food we feel they're eating, or fast food, unhealthy food, but we don't stop to look at the fact that the fruit bowl is actually steadily going down. And that's very common for us as parents. When we're busy, our attention gets focused on what our kids are not doing. And so really, the essence of strength-based parenting, and you don't have to be a psychologist to do this, is to actually intentionally notice the fact that they are eating the fruit, and intentionally notice the fact that there are times when they're off the screen, and intentionally notice those times where they are good kids and they're communicating and laughing and being friendly and kind and sharing and doing what they need to do. That's not all of the time, obviously, but the more we train our attention to focus on those and praise those, the more that behavior comes forward, and the less time we have to focus on the negative.
And I guess that it's so relieving once again to know that, and as I said, we don't have to be a psychologist to practice strength-based parenting. It's about a shift of mindset. And I guess that, again, for everyone who's listening and watching, we know that in the field of psychology, there's this term called negativity bias, which is our human tendency to play a heavier psychological weight in the negative incident experiences, whatever unpleasant or negative events that happen in our life. We tend to remember that a little bit more stronger than the pleasant and positive one. And I guess that the same applies to the parenting aspects as well.
It absolutely does, Demas. I think it's really good of you to bring up that the negativity bias for people who are listening, and for them to understand that our brain is kind of hardwired to spot first what is going wrong and fix that. But that gets amplified in parenting because on a daily basis, there's a lot that can go wrong, because that's just life. So that, and in fact, in chapter 2 of my book, I have a whole chapter on us as parents and what we're up against. Why is it that even if we love our kids so much, our brain tends to go to what's wrong with my child and how do I fix that? Before it goes to what's right with my child and how do I amplify that? And so the negativity bias is as you know, because you've read the book, is one of the things that I talk about in that chapter.
That's right. And I guess that the other aspects of parenting is that inevitably there will be some sort of social comparisons. As much as we say that our kids are unique, I love you just the way that you are, Sometimes we do compare, whether it's in terms of developmental milestones, in terms of specific skills and talents, and maybe in terms of some of these mischievous behaviors as well. We tend to, why can't you be so and so? Oopsie, zip them out sometimes. Yeah.
It's really true. We do. And when we do that sort of social comparison, it's natural for us to do that. But it never ends well, because there's always going to be a child who on a certain dimension is, getting better grades or sort of is able to speak more confidently to adults or, it has that kind of sense of social confidence with their peers. And you're always going to find another child who may not be better all up, but on one dimension is going to be better. And one of the things that I've found most powerful in my own parenting, and I think we saw it a lot we're seeing it in COVID, is we're getting a peek into other people's homes and we're seeing that no one's perfect, People are having are having arguments with their son or their daughter, or they're feeling as a parent like, I'm not doing enough, like I'm not keeping up enough, I'm not doing the right thing, I'm not giving my child the right whatever it happens to be. And so we often as parents feel on the back foot. And one of the benefits of having this mindset shift and learning how to intentionally focus in on the strengths of our kids is that when we do engage in that social comparison with other children, or when we do feel like I'm not giving and I'm not skilled enough as a parent, or I'm not giving enough, or whatever the version of I'm not enough is for you, me, and it's different for everyone, is then we can look at our kids' strengths. We can see, okay, well, maybe they are spending a bit too much time on the screen. Maybe I'm not spending enough time as a parent, sort of also being their tutor, but this child has this great sense of humor or this wonderful sense of perspective, and they can kind of stand back and see the world, or, I can put them into a problem solving situation and they can just naturally look at all the different pieces, or they're the ones who can set up all the technology in the home. When we focus first on the assets of our children, it helps us see that, they're actually doing okay and they're going to work out all right. And so we can relax that pressure that we put on ourselves as parents, where we're often feeling like we're not doing enough.
Or feeling that we are inadequate or incompetent. So once again, I know that you have given us a glimpse in terms of strength-based parenting, and obviously, for those again who are interested, they can read your book. It's called Strength Switch. Perhaps, maybe can, in a nutshell, what is strength-based parenting? Because obviously the term seems to be self-explanatory if we focus or essentially on the strengths of our children. Can you just unpack that a little bit more for us?
Yeah. So strength-based parenting I guess it's a philosophy of choosing to focus first on what is right with your child before we focus on what is wrong. And that word before is really important, because it's not an either or. I know you were keen to sort of talk about what are some of the myths of strength-based parenting. And like the biggest myth of strength-based parenting is that we worry that if we focus first on the positive qualities in our kids, that means that we're not helping them to build up the areas that they need to build up. And so that's why that word before is important, because it's about focusing on what is right with your children before you focus on what is wrong. It's not about ignoring what is wrong. It's not about ignoring, if your child needs additional tutoring in an academic subject, then as a strength-based parent, you wouldn't say, well, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to focus on the subject that they're doing well in. So it's where we place our attention first. It is a bit of a philosophy, and it's intentional. For a lot of parents, we weren't raised that way, and so we have to sort of intentionally say, I'm going to do this differently, and I'm going to aim to build my child up. And so again, one of the myths around that is that if I'm connecting my children with their unique strengths, is that going to kind of artificially inflate their ego?
Yes.
And is that going to make them not try because they think, oh, well, I'm good, I don't need to try? So you're nodding. So, this is, I know these are some of the myths around this approach, just because I've been working in this field for almost 20 years and working as a psychologist for 27 years. So I've just had thousands of these conversations with parents who say, I understand what you're saying, but my concern is if I focus first on what is right with my child and I cultivate that and I bring that forward, is that going to give them an artificial ego? Are they going to be really inflated and not want to try, not feel like they have to try? And there's a counterintuitive in my research, because my research shows that the more you connect your kids with their strengths and they have this inner sense of like kind of confidence, it doesn't make them complacent. It actually makes them confident. And when you have confidence, you have that like proactive energy to want to succeed and to want to achieve more. When you lack confidence as a child, it can backfire. It can actually make children give up. So it's sort of the opposite to what we might be fearful about with strength-based parenting.
So again, based on your research, it shows that the strength-based parenting actually promote confidence. I like that, rather than complacencies. And of course, with the sense of confidence, then the kids will be, I guess, have this higher likelihood to want to learn more, grow more, even if they fail. And because there's an underlying healthy level of confidence that yes, I'm just going to give it another shot, give it another try. And I'm glad that we
I'm sorry, I'm getting excited. I'm getting excited that you're saying this. I'm sorry. It's sometimes hard on Zoom. I feel like I'm interrupting you, but I'm getting very excited about what you're saying, because we did one research study where we looked specifically at perseverance and persistence and engagement. And what we found is with teenagers and children of the age of 11 and 12, that in this particular study, we asked them to rate their parents. And so it's all confidential. We don't know who the parents are. We don't know who the child is.
That's good to know.
They give us a rating. They give us a rating of the degree to which they feel their parents see their strengths and know what their strengths are and encourage them to use their strengths. And what we found in that research study was the higher rating from the 11 and 12-year-olds and the teenagers. So that is the more that they felt their parents helped them to see their unique strengths and use their unique strengths, the higher their levels of persistence, perseverance, and engagement were. And you mentioned mindset before. So the more likely they were to have a growth mindset, meaning that they understood that they can grow, they can get better in whatever field it is. They can get better grades, they can become more socially confident, they can get better at sport, they can get better at art. These were they were statistically significant outcomes of having a strength-based parent. And my explanation for this sort of scientific finding was that if you imagine yourself as a young child or a teenager, and it's very easy to live with a lot of self-doubt. And so you go through those ordinary daily challenges. Maybe you don't do as well in an assignment. Maybe you don't make the sports team. Maybe you don't feel kind of socially confident or that you're fitting in, whatever the sort of challenge or adversity is, that you are more likely to think, I'll get there. I can persevere and I can get there. If what you're falling back on is this kind of inner core of, this is who I am. These are my good qualities that I can draw on. So I think you're absolutely right in your insight that kids who know their own strengths persevere for longer through challenge and adversity and failure.
I guess based on my own personal experience, I totally agree with that, in the sense that as a family, we moved from South Australia to Melbourne last year in the middle of the pandemic. And obviously, my son's supposed to attend to a brand new school. But of course, by the time we touched down, arrived, was locked down, which means that for the first 3 terms, he had no opportunity to make new friends, to visit the schools. And first, they were just homeschooling over the Zoom, trying to make some sort of friendships. But again, I'm grateful for his resilience. I also has been intentionally, not consistently, but as much as I can, applying the principle of strength-based parenting, just encouraging her and lifting it up. And yes, it was challenging for him, but by the time term 4 happened last year, that was officially his first time visiting the schools, making friends, meeting his teachers. And I'm so grateful that because he has the underlying confidence, yes, he has to make the intentional effort. But from term 4 until right now, we're term 1 or term 2, can't really remember. He makes a lot of great friendships and is able to connect to the school community. Obviously, the school community also has been exceptionally very well in terms of supporting him through the whole transition as well. So I can definitely, at a personal level, as a parent, reap the benefits of strength-based parenting.
Good. I mean, that must have been such a hard time for your son at that age. But yeah, I mean, what you did was you were the strength-based parent, and as you and I have both said, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be strength-based parent 100% of the time every day, but enough during those 8 months of like lockdown, relocation, not being at school to meet your new friends. You know, you were able to lift him up and give him that sense of solid foundation by connecting him with his strengths and helping him through that time of adversity, so that when he did go on to get to go back to school and meet his friends in person, he was able to transition more successfully and more effectively.
Absolutely.
And I suppose, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that it kind of brings up another myth about strength-based parenting where and I understand this concern parents have, where they come up to me and say, am I sort of creating am I wrapping my child up in cotton wool? You know, am I creating this kind of fragile child because the assumption is, because they say, by only telling them what is good. And I'm very quick to say, no, because you're not only telling them what is good. You're also working on the things they need to work on. It's just that more often than not, we really only tell them what is wrong. So when we take that strength-based approach, we're having more of a balanced approach of telling them what is good and what needs to be addressed. And so your example is a really good example of the opposite. Like your son wasn't fragile. You weren't wrapping him up in cotton wool. By pointing out his strengths, you actually developed his resilience and his capacity for perseverance and endurance and mental toughness, so that he could get through that really challenging time.
That's right. And again, what you mentioned, that strength-based parenting is the shift of mindset, that we choose to focus on the strengths before we jump straight into the correction part, the disciplinary part, which again can be a big myth. You know, if I apply strength-based parenting, doesn't mean that I have to praise my sons or my daughters all the time. There's no room for corrections, no room for disciplinary actions, which we have busted the myth hopefully by now.
Yes, I hope so.
Okay, so I guess at a practical level, how can parents actually develop some of these skills to apply strength-based parenting?
Yeah, and it's great that we're sort of talking about the practicality of it too, because I know in doing the research and then, you know, writing the book and developing my online course and the sort of downloadable materials, I wanted to make it really, really practical, because I'm a parent myself. And like I said, 2 teenagers, I'm working, I don't have a lot of time to do this. And so we need to just have these little like micro moments of parenting during the day where we can kind of like inject a little bit of that strength-based approach. I think the first really practical thing for parents to do is to do a survey. And Ademus, you know, having done the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology at the University of Melbourne, you're very familiar with the strength-based surveys. The one that I use, and you will be familiar with this one, is the Values in Action survey. And the reason that I use it is because it's free. It's beautiful, sort of 20-year-long, evidence-based, translated into multiple languages. But it was developed by 2 very well-known psychology researchers in the US, but it was funded by a charity. And so because it's funded by a charity, it means we all get the benefit of being able to do that survey for free. And so that's the place where I'd start. I'm not sure if you put links, Deemas, under your...
Yes, I can certainly include that. Yes.
Yeah, great. So put that link in there, and that's the place where I would start. The beauty of that is that if you have children over the age of 11, they can do the survey. So there's a youth version of the survey, and then there's also an adult version of the survey. And so you can do the survey yourself as a parent and find out, well, what are my top strengths?
Yeah.
And then you can have your child do the survey. And it's a very lovely starting point for practically bringing strengths into the family environment, because you start to identify, okay, well, you know, these are my strengths as a mother, and your child, that, you know, and you can have a conversation around, you know, well, maybe your child has like a lot of playfulness and humor, and you can say, that is something I've really noticed about you. And, you know, I really appreciate when you bring that into the family environment. You know, if we're on a long car trip and then, you know, you'll say something funny and it makes us all laugh. And so the survey, I think, is a really practical thing to do. And then the technique of strength spotting, which is essentially what it sounds like. So it's, as a parent, it's spotting when you see your child using their strengths. Maybe they're using perseverance. Maybe they're using humility. Maybe they're showing their leadership. Maybe they're showing kindness. You know, for example, with my 2 kids during the lockdown, I could hear a lot of their conversations with their friends, because all of their conversations were over devices.
Yeah.
And you'd have that, it comes back to that negativity bias again, because my son was he was gaming a lot. And, you know, ordinarily I'd be like, oh, this is not good. And so I'd see him gaming, and my first response was a negative response, like, no, that's too much. He's on the device too much. But then I just pause and listen, and I would hear his conversation with his friends, and I would hear how he was being so kind to his friends and, you know, helping to lift them up during a hard time. And so that's that sort of moment of strength spotting. So it's tuning in, and it's a very practical thing to do as parents, is just notice when your child is using their strengths and call it out, you know, say, oh, I love it when I heard how kind you were being to your friends. That was really good. Or I saw how perseverant, you know, I saw how hard that was for you. Or, you know, you just crack me up when you make that joke. And so that's a really practical thing to do as well. You can do things like strengths challenges within the family. And so that's kind of like, as a family coming together and picking a strength that we want to develop, we want to grow. And it can be any sort of strength. It could be the strength of teamwork. It could be the strength of perspective. It could be the strength of curiosity. And as a family saying, right, well, this is our kind of contract. Like, for the next month, we're really going to aim to be more curious about the world, more curious about each other. So doing those sort of strengths challenges, the strength spotting, the strength survey, I have a lot of these tools available in the online course or in the downloadable pack, but you can develop them yourself. So we have a big strengths family tree. So you can sit down and have a conversation about, well, what are the strengths of your parents? What are the strengths of your grandparents, your great grandparents, your aunties, your uncles, and really kind of map out like what are the sort of consistent strengths that are coming through the family. So there's lots of kind of exercises that you can do around that. Anything that you can sort of do that's visual that you can put on your fridge, even a kind of strength spotting chart. So one for mum, one for dad, one for the kids, or, you know, if you're in a single parent family or a blended parent family, you know, one for whoever the family member is. And just kind of like, when you go to the fridge, writing a little note and saying, thanks for this, thanks for that.
Very, very practical. And to summarize, as you mentioned, the first one is to take the strength surveys. You know, obviously the parents of the kids can take the free versions of the VIA character strength survey. I remember that my son had done that, the youth or the kids version as well. It's always going to have a very, I guess, a pleasant kind of conversation, a discussion, because overall kids like to be acknowledged and validated, especially coming from parents, where you specifically calling out and naming the strengths. And you're absolutely right. Before we apply strength-based parenting, we need to be able to know what are our strengths as parents and the strengths of our children. And another approach, we call it, the name it, the claim it, and the aim it approach. Means first you name the strengths, identify the strengths, and then to discuss in terms of benefits the strengths have brought to its current past and current success, and then to see in what other creative ways to be able to apply the strengths consistently in across other situations as well. So the strength surveys, the strength spotting, the strength challenges. So there's so many other practical activities that the parents can actually explore, experiment, and continue to apply some of these strength-based parenting strategies.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I guess that the next questions will be, I understand that, for some parents, they are survivors of child abuse, or they have parents who constantly criticize them of not being good enough. Okay, therefore, they may struggle to see and celebrate the strengths of in their children. What are some helpful things they can do to be empowered with confidence and skills to help their children build resilience and ultimately thrive?
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important question, because that was my own journey, being raised by abusive parents, and always being criticized, and growing up with, in my case, sort of like a lot of anxiety, depression, eating disorder, just generally lacking confidence because I was always being told what was wrong with me, and then abused on top of that. So it is a choice that we have to make as parents to say, I'm going to do this differently. And even if you weren't abused, if you just growing up with like an emotionally cold parent, a parent who didn't know how to show affection, or a parent who maybe misplaced love, but felt that their role was to kind of like point out everything that was wrong with you, to fix that, so that if they fix that, then their role or their view was kind of criticism is good for my child, because the more that they're aware of what they need to fix, and if they fix those things, then they're going to be more happy and more successful as an adult. And so there's the kind of full continuum of so many of us who didn't get that sort of supportive, warm, loving, strength-based oriented parenting. And so the first thing I'm going to say about that is it's really just a choice. Like you have to intentionally choose, I'm going to do this differently. And then when you've made that choice, then to your question, it's like, well, how do I do this differently? Because I grew up with a certain role model, and so there's not like a one size fits all answer to that question. I think there's a couple of things to do. And this, in a way, it kind of depends on your own strengths. So for me, I have strength of curiosity, love of learning. I'm sort of, my strengths are like scholarship. That's why I became a researcher at the university. So for me, it was reading. Like I read a lot of different books to understand a different way of doing this. For other people, it's more, their strengths will be more like hands-on, learning through experience. And so that's more about just picking out friends who you admire their parenting, and observing, talking to them about, well, what would you do here? What would you do there? Some people love sort of getting onto the internet and read. There's lots of really good parenting blogs out there. And of course, things like my book. The biggest, I think, so they're all kind of like ways of learning how to do it differently, right? So reading books, doing scholarship, observing other people who are doing it differently, reaching out, talking to other people. And then the most kind of, I think, so you make the intentional choice, you observe how it can be done differently. And then the third point is that internal change within yourself. And for me, the biggest tool that has helped me is the practice of mindfulness. And mindfulness can be done in all sorts of different ways. So you can choose a practice of mindfulness that suits you. If you're not the type of person who likes to like sit down for half an hour every day and You can do mindfulness, when you're driving. You can do mindfulness when you're out walking. You can listen to music and be mindful. But what mindfulness has done for me over decades now is it's helped me to cultivate that capacity to have the ability to press pause in my brain, so that when my brain automatically wants to repeat to my children what was done to me, because that's how my brain was programmed, I'm able to press pause and stop and say, no, that's not the way I want to do this. I want to do this differently. And so you make that choice and you have that intention. And what mindfulness does is it teaches your brain how to slow down, how to control its thoughts, how to respond rather than react, and how to have that moment of pressing pause and not just repeating what was done in your childhood. And so I know it's some people who are listening to this might think, well, that sounds like a very sort of fuzzy answer. But actually, mindfulness is a very concrete practice that you can do. And, there's lots of, and again, Ademus, maybe you can put in the notes, there's lots of free apps that you can download. A simple Google search will give you so many different mindfulness techniques and they're actually concrete techniques. It sounds like a fuzzy thing to do, but they're concrete techniques that if you bring into your daily life, while you're brushing your teeth, or while you're driving the car, or in between a Zoom meeting, or while you're walking the dog, if they're the moments during the day where you choose to just do some deep breathing and tune into your own thought patterns, and over time you're able to start to observe and listen to your brain and what it's telling you. And when you can observe and listen, that's when you have the capacity to press pause and redirect. And so that I know it doesn't sound like a concrete thing in terms of what you're asking, but it is honestly the most practical and concrete thing you can do. And it's really about starting with yourself first and sort of re-engineering your brain, so it's stepping away from your childhood, because that that was your question. What happens for parents who've grown up who were abused in their childhood, or didn't have that strength-based approach. And so
thank you for that. Thank you. Again, for parents who grew up in a household where there's either it's abuse or lots of heavy criticisms, that almost sometimes become of a default kind of thinking and feeling and patterns. What you're saying, that by simply making that choice, once again, is talking about changing the mindset incrementally and know that I can do differently despite what happened. And that doesn't mean that I'm in this alone. I'm glad you talk about also observing the friends or the communities, pick up the positive role models. They may not have so-called positive role models in terms of the parents, but yet if they're able to observe, again, the other positive role models collectively, just reaching out to getting that kind of support, I believe that again is part of the intentional changes as well. Again, this is a generalized statement here, I guess, in a lot of Western society where there's so much emphasis based on individual, it's on self. I have to do this by myself, I can do this alone. But collectively, we know there's a lot of strengths, there's a lot of wisdom, there's a lot of compassion as well. So that, again, continuous can be another stepping to the incremental change. And mindfulness, again, is talking about anchoring into the present moment, recognizing those default patterns that happened in the past, and able to have that mental space to pause, to reflect, okay, now I can choose to do a little bit more differently. So it's almost like designing our thinking patterns rather than fall back to the default type of thinking patterns.
Exactly. It's a design process. And the thing is that the more you do it, the easier it becomes, because you're developing like a new sort of algorithm in your own mind. And so the more that you have those little moments where you did successfully pause and take a breath and change what you said to your child, then the more that gets ingrained in a new neural network, and the easier it becomes over time. And it's like tying your shoes, or learning a new computer program. I just downloaded the latest iOS on my phone, for example, and everything's shifted. So the little button that to be here is now. And so for the first week, I was like, oh, I cannot find anything. But even a week in, I go to the old click button, and then I'm like, oh no, that's down here. So our brain learns pretty quickly, and then it becomes sort of second nature. But it is that re-engineering process, and it's just a practice. And I guess underneath that, it's a little bit of a philosophy of like, do the best you can. I think it's Angela Maya who has that expression. I'm going to get this wrong, but it's something along the lines of like, do the best you can with what you know. And then when you know better, do better, So the mantra that I have for myself is permission to be human. I'm not going to be the perfect parent as much as I want to, particularly given my own childhood. But I'm doing the best that I can, and I don't always get it right. And so in those moments, okay, stop, pause, remind myself that I'm doing the best I can, and I'm allowed to make mistakes, and I can model to my kids that I get things wrong, and I can come back to them and say, you know what, I wish I hadn't have done that way. I should have done it differently, and I'm sorry about that. With my 18-year-old son, we had a sort of point of tension the other day, and I was able to say to him, Nick, this is the first time I've ever parented an 18-year-old. Like this is new for me, just like it's new for you. Like I'm a beginner too in parenting a young adult. So like I'm going to make mistakes along the way, and the best thing I can do is come back to you and say, that was I overreacted there, and I made a mistake, and I'm really sorry about that. Like, can we start again? And so that to me has been one of the most powerful things is kind of like owning the mistakes that I make along the way and modeling to my kids that it's okay to make mistakes. It doesn't permanently damage a relationship. And both of my kids are actually really good at saying sorry. And I think it's because I've modeled that to them. But it is very hard as a parent to admit fault.
Absolutely.
But again, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And it's so powerful for the relationship. I think there's kind of three key things to repeatedly say to your kids. Number one, the obvious, I love you. Number two, like, I believe in you. And number three is like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry when I get things wrong. Let's figure out a different way of doing this.
Yeah, I love that. And also, again, just remind me between my relationship with my sons, being a parent saying sorry can be a big thing because we all have our own so-called parental ego, authority, or we want to be right at least most of the time. So when I realize that stuff
we lose power. I think we lose power if we say if we apologize to our younger child, we feel like we've given them power, we've lost power. But actually, again, this is a counterintuitive because all of the research in parenting and like good leadership styles or anyone who has power rather than power over, it's power with. And so the best leaders actually voluntarily give away their power to their followers, and then they get the power back tenfold. But as parents, it is a bit daunting to feel like, oh, we've now put ourselves in the lower power position because we've admitted to our kids that we didn't do that very well. But the reality is that over time, that doesn't diminish our sense of authority and power over our kids. With our kids, it actually increases it. It increases our legitimacy, and it increases the relational connection.
That's right. As you mentioned earlier, it's the modeling of humanity. It's modeling of forgiveness or compassion or owning out the mistake in the household. And the kids can see that, hey, as you're grown-up adults, you're able to do that, which means that also give me permission that sometimes if I stuff up, I can still come back to mom or dad to say that I'm sorry, forgive me. Me and my son will have this specific gesture, which I'm not able to show you because I need two persons. That's one way that sometimes when we get so emotional that we find it hard to say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Then we just have these gestures as a form to say that, to make up and to make peace and to move on. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you've said that, Ademus, because it doesn't have to be as formal as, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I wish I had have done that differently. It's a repair gesture. So it can be words, but it can also just be that whatever the hand signal is that you and your son have, or a hug or a pat on the back, or like a private code word, or like a little in joke that you have with each other, where you're able to sort of like broach that divide and like reconnect with your child.
That's right. Well, Lee, I have one last question for you. Got nothing to do about strength-based parenting, but I'm keen to know what's one thing that you have been doing this week to look after your well-being.
Well, that's a lovely question. Okay, so can I say two things?
Yes, please. Absolutely, yes.
Well, I mean, I've been doing a lot of mindfulness this week, all through the pandemic. Just deep breathing, sort of waking up in the morning before I get out of bed, just doing that deep diaphragm breathing and calming my nervous system down. Being aware of the kind of like the fearful and anxious thoughts, and being mindful of those, and also focusing on, yes, but it's a sunny day, I have a backyard, my kids are healthy. So sort of mindfully balancing out that anxiety. And then the other thing that I've been doing, not just this week, but all through COVID, is ecotherapy. And what I mean by that is just I've been getting out, I've been walking a lot, just walking around my neighborhood, paying attention to people's front gardens, paying attention to the sound of the birds, walking a little bit further on where there's a beautiful nature reserve near where I live, going out into nature and using nature as a natural healing force, because all the research on ecotherapy does show that when we're in green settings, it doesn't have to be full on nature. It can just be your local neighborhood. It can be a park. It could be your own back garden. It could be, if you live in an apartment, it can be in a balcony with some pot plants. That just being in that context of nature, it triggers a relaxation response. And so I've been intentionally getting myself out into green as much as I can to trigger that relaxation response in myself, so that I'm kind of, because when we're calm, we're better equipped to deal with all the complexities that we're dealing with right now. And you and I are doing this interview during COVID times. Well, hopefully that's not going to last forever. And but the same, even if someone comes and watches this interview in 10 years time and we're well past COVID, it's still the same philosophy of taking care of ourselves. In my case, I'm doing a lot of mindfulness and ecotherapy, but the more we take care of ourselves, the more we have the bandwidth to deal with life's challenges and problems. And even if they're not big COVID problems, they're just everyday problems, we have the bandwidth to deal with those things. So we're more stable in ourselves, which means we have more capacity to give to others, whether it be children, friends, colleagues, parents, etc.
Yep, absolutely. And the way I see it is laying the foundations after foundations after foundations to build up this whole well-being resources, reservoir, and capability. So when things does happen, that's so-called through the curve at us, we are more prepared, more equipped in responding to some of these disruptions and challenges that we haven't seen in decades or in the whole generations. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, Lee. I really appreciate your time, your insights, and your wisdom. And of course, if you want to engage Lee's expertise in strength-based parenting, positive educations, and positive organizations, you can visit her website, leawaters.com, or get a copy of her book, The Strength Switch, and start playing with some of these strength-based practical strategies to help your children and your teen to flourish. So thank you for watching. I'm Demus from Strength Optimizers. We're here to bring out the best in you by optimizing your strengths. Have a fabulous day, everyone. Goodbye.